Good morning, good afternoon, buongiorno, buon pomeriggio, buonasera, good night, whatever you are. Thank you so much for joining us in this book presentation as our limited edition this year as well of the book presentation is going to be a limited version, which means a different way of doing book presentation. We were very happy to have be able to do this again, to give a space, even if a different space, a virtual space, to authors and to books we really appreciate and evaluate, and to bring it to all of you. Moreover, to have a discussion, a chat, something live to be talking about. So today we will have two very nice guests with very important books that we really would like just to show you and talk about as much as time as we have. And first of all, there will be Steve Massa will be joining me today. So hi, Steve.
Hi, Paolo. Hi, everyone.
Hi. So the book we are talking, let's dive in, because it's, as you can see, it's not only a beautiful book, but we were just discussing how much there is to read, which is great.
It's
hard and beautiful, as
like
we
ROSCOE. It's hefty like ROSCOE himself.
Exactly, yes, it's a perfect book representation of ROSCOE, right? Steve, as always in the book presentation, I would like you to introduce a little bit. I definitely have some notes, and I hope there's going to be some questions, but I particularly, let me start with the title, because it's not a whatever title, is Rediscovering Roscoe, the films of Fatty Arbuckle. So it's kind of mirroring things that I really like, and the stress on the films. It's particularly interesting to me, and of course, I'm sure it's not a chance that it's there. So
well,
would you, yes, please.
Well, that's true. I mean, the focus of the book and my main point in writing it was to give attention to Roscoe's work as a filmmaker, as a comedian, as an all-around comedy creator. I felt that most of the previous books, the main event was the scandal in the trials. And often his career was something as an afterthought to the trial itself. And so I really wanted to focus on the work. I wanted to focus on the films and go film by film and discuss them and present them.
Yes, that's the beauty of, I feel, of the book, and I want to share with everybody is exactly that. We do not talk about either Roscoe life or professional life. It's a kind of a beautiful parade of going through, yes, all what happened in his life, but also through his, and moreover, because he would this way it is possible to talk about not only the movie where he's on, but the movie he was hiding behind in a way, or was forced to for many years. So all that part is not that easy to find out, and for sure to find. So I thought it was particularly fascinating on that point. There is so many things to say. I would like to start from one of the many things that I found interesting is one of the beginning of the book, when your friend, colleague, however you would like, partner in crime or whatever you prefer, Ben Model, with your beautiful show that we all have enjoyed and loved so much through this awful, terrible year. And thanks again for both of you for all this.
Well, thanks. It's really been a pleasure to do the silent comedy watch party. It's, it was sort of our taking lemons and making lemonade out of it, because all our screenings had been canceled, all of Ben's work, and it was just, we wanted to continue to reach people, and we all need laughs right now. More than anything, we need laughs. So that was the whole purpose. And originally, the pilot, we were just trying to see if we could actually get on the air and actually physically do it. And it worked out. So, we're for the foreseeable future, we're going to continue to do it every week. And we get response from people all over the world and really look forward to it. So,
Yeah. In the preface, Ben is saying that the beginning of comic films in the US, it's moreover, should be considered, and I thought it's a fascinating metaphor, like a Big Bang. So an explosion of many planets, and they are the own planets were doing their own things, and as Big Bang, they're doing their things for the first time.
Right.
So sometimes they were doing something totally new, totally different, and each one is a galaxy more than single each actor or director. So I would like you to talk. What is your feeling, or what was your first feeling or impression in the sense of the uniqueness that Roscoe has it?
Oh, well, his uniqueness. Well, there's certainly, from his first film for Mack Sennett, which does exist, The Gangsters, there's a tremendous ease that he has in front of the camera. He's just very easy, and the character is, pretty fully formed at the very beginning. And also, soon, about a year and a half later, he would be directing himself. And he has that same ease as a director. He never pushes. Things kind of just flow naturally, and he finds the opportunity to put the gags. That's one thing. Is just his supremely confident, I think, as a performer and as a director. And he just brought this. He just knew what he was doing, and he's just very self-assured and just brought it to the screen. And there's usually never anything frenetic or overdone. He's just sort of really very measured, and he just finds the right spot.
Yeah, I think exactly that what struck me too was that the fact to what I've seen, of course, which is only a little fraction compared to what you've seen, and what is survived. It's still a good amount. That's also definitely a topic.
We're actually lucky because he made something in the neighborhood of 234 films, and about more than half of that do exist. Not all of them are readily available, but that he pretty good batting average of his films that still exist.
Do you feel like that? I mean, of course, we will address the topic of the banishment and whatever happened, the trial, briefly and in a way that makes sense. Again, talking about film. So, film-wise, do you think that the silent era films suffer more than the sound or later after the trial films because of that, or no? There was a general ban on him, generally speaking. I'm talking about archive-wise and what it was preserved as well.
I think there was a taint of his films. When I grew up, I was watching silent comedies on television that they were repackaged for children. There were shows called Comedy Capers or Who's the Funny Man, and they would take the silent comedies, take out all the titles, add funny music and sometimes funny narration, but they would present these to children. But I never saw any Fatty Arbuckle comedies. That was sort of off limits.
Absent. Yeah.
But I do think that the archives didn't have that, though. The archives really went after his films and I think tried to preserve them. They didn't skip over his films, the archives themselves. But I think in popular culture, it was just you wouldn't show his films. Not until I think really what changed that were the Buster Keaton festivals. That used to started in the 70s. Raymond Rohauer always had the Buster Keaton festivals, and they would include the Arbuckle films. They would include his comique comedies because Buster was in them. And that gave audiences an opportunity to see Roscoe and, want to see more. And I think that was kind of breaking the ice in the 1970s.
So it took as well a long time after all.
It took a long time. Yeah.
There was the nickname he came up with that was particularly interested in that sense. That was actually William Goodright, and it was speculated the fact that he was choosing that to be shortening William B. Good, which I would be extremely funny, but it's not right.
Well, that's very interesting because he took it. The actual name, William Goodrich, he took from his father. His father's name was William Goodrich Arbuckle. So he took William Goodrich. But where the Will Be Good came from was during the making of Sherlock Jr., the Buster Keaton feature. The trade magazines all talked about the fact that Roscoe was directing the film. It was called Sherlock Holmes Jr. at that time. And they said, Roscoe Arbuckle is directing it. This is in the trade magazines. The public wasn't reading this, but the exhibitors were. and it said Roscoe Arbuckle is directing Sherlock Jr. under the name Will Be Good. Do you get the joke? They were kind of playing that up. And in his autobiography, Buster Keaton says, I gave him that name. I gave him the name Will Be Good. And I think it's something the Keaton studio put in as a joke. And then it stuck.
Then it's how it comes.
Still think of it today. Oh, yes, he was Will Be Good.
Which, I mean, I guess also it's like, we'll go with the idea that we have of his character and of himself. Before going back to the second part of his career, that is also fully explained in the book. That's why I think it's magnificent as well. What do you think, putting together all the film collection and all the film that are listed here, what is your opinion on his directing skills and how they were combining with his acting? So in other words, what do you think would it be the most interesting and different ways of directing silent movies, silent comedy movies?
Well, he was an excellent director. I mean, he was one of the, by 1915, he was really, I think, the best director on the Max Sennett lot. Those were those Mabel and Fatty films he was making, you know, with Mabel Normand. But he was really the best director. And I think Sennett knew it as well, because I found items that talk about when Sennett would go to New York or somewhere on a business trip, he left Roscoe in charge of the studio. Wow. Roscoe would take over. So I think he had that much confidence in Arbuckle. And Arbuckle never had any problems meeting his quota of films. You know, he always got his films out, but he was, you take a film, for example, like Fatty and Mabel Adrift. It's the direction's very sophisticated, and there's a great deal of warmth. And, you know, some of it's very touching when he gives Mabel a shadow kiss. He leans down and gives her a kiss. You know, he was a very, and also what Buster Keaton talks about, in interviews, Keaton says that Arbuckle was very generous with other performers. He didn't hog the screen. Keaton said that Arbuckle didn't care who got the laughs as long as the laughs were in the picture.
That is particularly amazing, I would say, because if you can see some of the photos that he sent us, because also he was particularly, especially at the beginning, known or very recognizable because of his body image, which will hint, I mean, somebody will never see a movie from him and see a photo of him exactly, let's see, like this, perfect. So we would exactly expect he would be the opposite of what actually his character is. I would say, yes, filling up the scene with his body and everything, but absolutely trying to be as big as possible and as small as possible in his way, and be exactly interacting as much as possible with the other actors, and as you said, be as generous. Maybe everybody will talk in how generous he was in many sense and many ways. So I found it particularly interesting in the creation of the character he actually developed for the movies.
Well, he was one of those people in the early film comedy, whether it was European or American, you had to have an image, you know, that people would respond to. And of course, he had the big round image. So right away, you know, you knew he was a comedian. He had that, you know, became an icon physically because of that. And there were a lot of other comedians like that who were large, and that's sort of all they had going for them, was really their size and their physicality. But Roscoe brought a lot more to the table. I mean, his amazing physical dexterity with props, you know, where he would throw knives behind his back up in the air and they flip and land point down, or he'd be able to flip pancakes and catch them behind his back. And I mean, he had an amazing dexterity and lightness on his feet. He was incredibly light for, you know, as big as he was. He was amazingly, like Oliver Hardy, you know, he was very light. So he had the standard equipment that was needed to be a silent screen comedian, but he had, you know, such talents. I mean, he brought so much more to it, his whole background on the stage and how he had developed his talents. So he was able to bring all that, you know, to film and bring a lot more to it.
I don't know if we can watch a little clip. Speaking of, so we can have we can give everybody an idea. I mean, a lot of people maybe that are watching already knows, but
yeah.
Let's see if Marco can help us. I know he's also busy. Let's see if it happens. In the meantime, yes, exactly. The physicality, the strike, it strike for ways that you not expect, and I think also. I would say, and on the book, I really appreciate one on the appendix. On the last part, it was you make also a very fair and truly, I think, or to my knowledge, recollection or list or other actor who might have a similarity with
other large size
of fat. In that sense, which must have a fat comedian is actually the title of that chapter, which I thought it was great because it really light up the differences of all these different actors that might be just perceived on a side or not, and instead they all have particularly single, and some were more popular and got more popular than others.
Sure, some like Oliver Hardy, you know, of course, became a comedy icon on his own, but there were tons. I mean, there were lots of these heavy plus size comedians, you know, in the silent era. And I took that, the title, "The Screen Must Have a Fat Comedian," came from an exhibitor ad from when Roscoe ended up being banned from the screen. There were producers, of course, who got their own large size comedian and tried to have him take Roscoe's place. And one of them was a comedian named Hilliard Carr, Fatty Carr. And that's where that phrase came from. It was on an exhibitor ad.
I thought that's lovely. And also there is I appreciate there is also fun in the book because there is, I have it here somewhere. There is a photo, oh, here it is. There is a photo of the comedian, the Bunny, the comedian, and you put a note down saying, this is something that you cannot watch.
Oh, it's a photo of John Bunny in the bathtub, which is not something you really want to see, you know.
No, and yet.
And once you see it, you can't forget it, you know, stuck in your head.
If you can see it. There we go.
This is actually, in 1915, he did a stage production called Bunny in Funnyland that he toured with. And actually, it didn't do well, and he lost a lot of money. He put his own money into it. But that photo was from the program that they gave out. They actually put it in the program.
And so you're wondering why? Maybe there could be a reason why. Who knows?
Why did they inflict? Maybe that's why it didn't do well. You know, after I saw they told people, don't go, you'll see that picture.
Yeah. We have a clip now. Maybe Marco can help us. So.
Well, Limburger cheese is, of course, you know, always used in silent comedies for its, you know, olfactory assault. and the Stan Laurel, number of people, you know. So
yeah, but I also thought, you know, that again, how he managed to fit in the scene, and even the way he dressed, of course, might be obvious, but it's absolutely not, I would say. In being original and different, but in a smart way, not just be the character, just being that kind of, but be using his body and what he's dressing as well as a meaning of comedy.
Yeah, no, he was very, you know, subtle, and there's other, of course, people in that scene. Al St. John, of course, who was actually Roscoe's nephew, and his sidekick, you know, his villain in the Keystone films, as the waiter. And then the dishwasher, the lady, is Kate Price, who is a silent comedy regular as well. And this clip was from The Waiter's Ball, which is a 1916 short that Roscoe made in Fort Lee, New Jersey. Actually, he and Mabel Norman left California for a few months and went to Fort Lee. Mabel came back soon, but Roscoe stayed and made some really wonderful films in Fort Lee.
That sounds great. It's very interesting, exactly, having like a more full idea through the book. And speaking of, I would like if you can talk us a little bit more about the sound era and what happened in the sound era, or right before, not only the band, but basically what happened, and how at the bare hand, if I'm not mistaken, it could be able to go briefly again on the screen. But before that, there was back and forth, and that's a part that I think is definitely not less known, but at least in my knowledge, the study of less known in that sense.
Yeah, he, you know, when sound came in, he had actually left films for a couple of years. Around 1927, he directed 2 features. He directed The Red Mill with Marion Davies and Special Delivery for Paramount with Eddie Cantor. And there was some producer interference, especially on The Red Mill. William Randolph Hearst was, you know, they had different directors come in, and it was not a pleasant experience for him. And he sort of left films for a couple of years. He was doing more stage appearances. He bought a sort of a supper club, the Plantation Inn, where he performed regularly. So he was doing pretty well. But when sound came in, also around the same time as the stock market crash, he lost money in the stock market. And so he went back to films in 1929, and he went back initially as a writer. He worked on a couple of scripts for Senate shorts, and he worked on the Wheeler and Woolsey features, The Cuckoos and Half Shot at Sunrise. And Burt Wheeler in interviews said that Roscoe really worked with them off the set, but helped develop their routines and worked with them as far as their timing and things like that. Then in 1930, he was hired again by Educational Pictures, who he had been directing for in the 1920s. And he became their director general. And for the next 2.5 years, he was directing tons of their, you know, 1-reel and 2-reel shorts with people like Lloyd Hamilton and Al St. John and Tom Patricola. But his style was very natural. You know, when you see these shorts, they're not like early sound shorts. They move very well. He was very easy at integrating dialogue. And he did that, you know, for 2.5 years and did very well. He also directed some shorts for RKO. And then in 1932, the Vitaphone Warner Brothers people came to him about the starring series. He was able to do his comeback, and he made those starring shorts. I think there are 6 of them, and starting with Hey Pop and Buzzing Around. And in the very beginning, at the very first ones, it looks like no time had passed since he'd been off the screen. He looks great. His voice fits his character very well. And the films are very clever. A lot of them are shot outdoors, and they have sequences shot silent with dubbed sound effects. And it gives it sort of a Jacques Tati kind of feel.
We have a question, actually. Can Steve address Arbuckle's balletic style? He plays on the opposite extreme of being fat and graceful, so I assume he had some kind of dance training?
Well, I don't Specifically, I don't think he studied ballet or anything or took classes, but he picked up dancing, because he was a vaudeville stage performer from 1904 through 1913, toured around the world with companies led by pretty famous people like Ferris Hartman and Leon Errol. And so I'm sure he danced in those shows. He picked it up as he went along. His wife, Minta Durfee, had been a dancer as well. I mean, it just, the vaudeville performers developed all kinds of skills because they were doing everything. So usually there was dancing, there was acrobatics, dialogue, pattern dialogue, all kinds of things involved. If you're a vaudevillian, that's just the kind of training you get by doing.
Yeah, I mean, so to what you're saying exactly now, and curiously enough, the sound, the coming of the sound didn't completely ban him off or was such a big issue or problem for him, because he had so many skills that can apply to so many ways. And the ballet part is interesting. The question, I really like it because it made us think exactly, well, maybe he was moving as ballet, but he picked it up from, and he picked it up like many other things that he was able to reuse.
I think he was naturally graceful as well. Even for someone so large. The one thing that I'm sort of sorry about is he started really performing as a singer on stage. And like Oliver Hardy, he would sing to illustrated slides. He would sing popular songs. And we never get to hear him sing on screen, which is unfortunate.
Do you think there are any recordings somewhere, or who knows?
Not that I found anything. It's a real shame. And he also did other films that are missing. When in the 1920s, when he was banned from the screen, he started making stage appearances, and he would make little films to be shown as part of the stage performances. And often these had Buster Keaton and Al St. John in them. They usually involved, Roscoe's troubles getting to the theater or problems he had backstage. And all of those are missing. None of those survive, but they would be fascinating to see.
We're getting close to the end, but we have another, more than a question, is a comment, but I think it goes to the point. I really enjoyed the book, but what he was saying is that sadly, the first thing that appear on Wikipedia page is the trails about Roscoe. And it would be great if this can be rewritten and more people can have access to his film in the same way Keaton, Lauren, Hardy, etc., are available. And I totally agree that it's unbelievable, but still, 2020, that's the main thing. That's the thing. Keep generally speaking, be whoever have an idea of.
That's true. It is unfortunate. I mean, the first trial, the scandal, was in 1921. So we're almost at 100 years. Yeah. But still, what most people think of first, especially people that don't know anything about film, is the trial, is the scandal. So it's still, I don't know if we'll ever get past that completely. Yeah, it's the first major celebrity scandal.
It is really absurd in that sense because of how much, and in the book is so clear. I mean, by the size of the book, how much he has done and survive, which is also two combinations that are not easy in silent era, and yet there is so much to talk about that. Before really closing, I don't see. Let me see if there is another comment, but I guess just a lot of let's watch more, which is great. Well, that's what we're gonna do. We can watch
if we could get more, if more of the films became available on DVD or because there are a number of them out there that can be put, and there have been some sets that are very good, but it just needs a higher profile of being able to access the films.
Yes, that is absolutely true. We all hope something will be done, and whoever is listening, I hope will think
someone out there.
Great idea. And so, to help even that, why don't we watch the last clip before closing?
One thing I would like to say, I'd like to, those clips of the Waiter's Ball were made available by my friend Dave Glass, who did a very nice restoration. There's a version that's around for years, has been somewhat trimmed, and he did a restored version. So I just wanted to mention that's where the clip came from.
No, absolutely, and it was gorgeous. And again, surprising and different, which is, I think, what it was. I mean, as we were talking about Planet at the beginning. Thank you very much, Steve. That was incredible, lovely. And I'll show the book one more time. Why not?
Thank you, Paulo. Yeah, if you can lift it, it's heavy.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And now we can pass to our next presentation. Here is the book we will be talking about. And I hope we did have some problem with, I hope Terry is there. Terry, yeah. Can you hear me? There we go. Oh, marvelous. Yeah.
We figured it out.
Yes, excellent. Good morning. Very early morning, I know, for you, Terry.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us.
I haven't had my espresso yet.
Oh, I see. Okay, so we caught you on guard, so you will tell us even more.
Yeah,
so as I was showing the book, let me show it again. Sorry. Here we go. As usual, we will go then at the more closely later on to usual question or comment about the book. But as a usual beginning, I would like you to start just addressing how come the book came along, and moreover, the title, which I really appreciate, is Film's First Family, the untold story of the Costello. But Film's First Family is really interesting, catching, but moreover, essential of the book, I would say.
Right, right. Well, for me, it started with the question, who was the first great movie star? And when no answer was coming, it just kind of blossomed there. What I eventually discovered was the actor that Photoplay magazine called the first recognized star in movies was Maurice Costello. He was the first film actor to receive fan mail. He was the first screen heartthrob, and it should be noted that in the first popularity poll in 1912, he received 7 times more votes than Florence Lawrence, who's generally considered to be the first movie star, which technically she was. But this shows us the difference between those who could more aptly be called pre-stars, I think, than those who really got caught up in this great rush of fame and adulation and wealth and success, that Maurice became the first to benefit and also suffer from. He also single-handedly created the job description of screen actor, if you can imagine someone actually doing that, by being the first to refuse to what was called double in brass, which meant having to do other jobs around the studio besides act, this being a requirement for many actors in 1907 when Maurice quit his job on the stage and went to work for the Vitagraph Company, which at the time was the most successful and innovative film studio in America. When he was handed a hammer and told to get busy, and this is very well documented, his indignant response was, "I'm an actor, I don't build sets." He then stormed up to the front office and gave them an ultimatum, and with that, the modern profession of screen acting was set in stone. He also created, to the best of my knowledge, was the first documented school of screen acting technique, which he and others called the slow motion style of acting, to counteract this conspiracy of speed that existed then between the cameraman and the projectionist. I eventually became acquainted with the rest of the family, the indomitable May Costello, Maurice's wife, Elaine Costello, who was probably the first child star in movies and who went on to become the first actor to star in an all-talking picture, The Lights of New York, in 1928. Her younger sister, Dolores, was the 7th most popular female star of 1928. Then, of course, she married John Barrymore, and by giving him a son, begat the Barrymore dynasty, which is still going strong thanks to Dolores's granddaughter, Drew. Yes, here in America. So the Costello's importance to the history of movies and American entertainment is not only remarkable, it's unprecedented.
Yeah, you were mentioning just some little hint of what is inside the book. There is a lot of well documented, as you were saying, precedent about the entire family, Maurice in particular, but not only. And yeah, definitely the other thing I would like you to talk a little bit more is not only what happened on the screen and during the screening, but also outside of it, because it's richly documented in the book as well.
Yes, that's a good story too. They were Hollywood's original dysfunctional family, as my friend and colleague Richard Degore so aptly puts it. They had a total of 9 failed marriages between them. Maurice caused the first movie scandal. It was compared to ROSCOE Arbuckle. It was minor, but it was covered nationally. This was in 1913, and he attacked his wife May and an alcohol-fueled rampage. And then there's the family's spectacularly acrimonious break up in 1927 is unlike anything you've ever read about in Hollywood history. And it all just kept slowly going downhill from there. Helene's tuberculosis, then her divorce, destroyed what was left of her career when her husband, Lowell Shulman, accused her of being an avid reader of pornography. Maurice, who had no shame in his later years, sued his daughter Dolores for financial support in a widely publicized lawsuit, and it goes on and on.
Yes, there is so many, and we will definitely talk a little bit more. I was just seeing if there's already a question, but there might be. The other things are definitely, again, we are addressing like the off-screen, the on-screen part is the fact that you were able to collect a lot of new, particularly specific sources, which make the book really valuable. So I would like you to talk a little bit more about that and how you got it, and also, of course, put all the thoughts together in what it is a plot almost.
It has a very rich backstory. I was fortunate to be able to interview John Barrymore's then 87-year-old daughter, Dee Dee Barrymore Bedell, who is now 90 and going strong, by the way, who had never offered up more than a few sentences for publication. But she ended up giving me literally hundreds of hours of interviews, which provided me so much new information about not just the Costellos, but also the Barrymores. She shared a very detailed and very personal memory of her parents' last angry encounter, and her own heartbreaking with her father in 1936, along with some other fascinating memories of John Barrymore. Helene's daughter, Deirdre LeBlanc, was forthcoming beyond my wildest hopes, and without her, I wouldn't have known that her mother wrote a couple of short autobiographies, much less got to use them. And without them, there really could have been no book about the Costellos. It took me 3 years to track down Denise Barrymore, who is no relation to the family, but who has amassed what I think is the largest privately held collection of Barrymore and Costello papers and photographs anywhere. She owns both of Jack and Dolores's honeymoon diaries, which are quite possibly the most delightful artifact ever to survive from Hollywood's golden age. And also the holy grail of Costello artifacts, Maurice's rage-filled diaries from 1905 through 1928. And I was able to use both of them. And, biography is only as good as its sources. So I was extremely fortunate to have some very good.
Indeed, that's the more remarkable things of the book is also how the different part of such a complex, as we are seeing, on-screen, off-screen story is told directly to documents and things that prove that not only things happen, but they happen the way in such an extreme way, because on a certain point you can even doubt that could be so many things happening in one family. Although, as you were saying, maybe the first dysfunctional family, so maybe it is more easy to understand now, or would it be maybe more difficult to understand back then? One last thing, because before maybe we pass to comments or some questions, just keep on. You were talking about a different figure in this family and different way in which the different member of the family were behaving and, let's say, interacting with the others. Do you feel like there is more a dominant figure in through all your research that you found in the family?
Yes. Each of them, really, except for Helene, had their dominant periods, but that mostly depended on who was making money at the time, who was working. When Maurice was the dominant Costello, but when his career foundered, they spent several years literally on the brink of starvation, which was nothing new, since the family had gone from rags to riches, then back to rags, and eventually back to riches. Dolores was born in the Soho district of Pittsburgh, which at the time was the single filthiest neighborhood in America. To give you an idea of just how virulent it was, for every 10 cases of typhoid in the Lower East Side of New York, there were over 100 in Soho. The fact that Dolores survived infancy at all is testimonial to her iron constitution. So this is indeed a story also of triumphant feminism, in that the women of the Costello family couldn't have come from any lower or risen any higher. Literally, in the case of Dolores, who reached the geographic pinnacle of Beverly Hills,
Exactly.
was on Tower Road. May Costello negotiated her daughter's first contract at Warner Brothers entirely without involvement, and in effect became their agent until Dolores began running the show. She would become the dominant member of the family, and woe betide the person who dared to stand in the way of what she wanted. I was able to paint, I think, an especially detailed portrait of her, since there's so many living family members who knew her very well, at least as well as anyone really could know her. Her marriage to Jack pretty much did her in emotionally, since she remained relatively shut down after that. Talking to her grandchildren, I found it incredible that she shared almost nothing of herself or of her marriage to Jack or of her film career, except to occasionally mutter, "Damn that Jack Warner," who she deeply, deeply disliked.
It is, you were mentioning right now how Dolores not only metaphorical, but really geographically reached the peak. And one of the chapter is at least titled on talking about the Xanadu and this, what else was happening in there. But I would like, if you agree with me, before we have any comments or questions, to talk a little bit about the almost kidnapping, or what happened, just to give a hint of who's watching what we are talking about.
Kidnapping?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was the only kidnapping that's in the book is the near kidnapping of Helene. Is that the one that you're referring to?
Yes.
Because they were traveling. This was really the first major rally. Well, I'm not sure there have been any other film shoots that have literally gone around the world, which they did. It was really quite a milestone in cinema history. But they were in the Middle East, and May had taken the girls out, and Helene was they were riding donkeys, and there was a young man who was kind of wrangling the animals, and they looked around, and Helene and the donkey boy, as she called him, were gone. But she just managed to see the heel of his shoe disappear around a corner. And if she hadn't seen that, she may have never seen Helene again, because they disappeared into this huge crowd. But as it is, she raced after him and enlisted the help of the townsfolk, who they formed a little posse, and they found the kidnapper, and I'm sure what happened to him was not pleasant, but they did get that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's one of more of almost feel reading the book, like the mixing of what is, again, could sound fictional, and yet it was totally real, comparing also of the movies that we're doing. Now, we have a question. Was there ever a discussion of John Barrymore involving Dolores Costello in any stage productions?
Well, Dolores talked about that. I was able to get the great Kevin Brownlow was so kind and sent me the full transcript, which is 40 pages of his and David Gill's interview with her. Only a small snippet of it made it into his Hollywood series. But she talks about, in the film Svengali, she and Jack very much wanted her to play Trilby. But Warner Brothers thought, because the public knew very well that they were married and that they had a child at that point, that Dolores would not play a very convincing, ingenue, and so they refused to allow her to do that, and that really upset her. And Jack wasn't particularly happy about that either. So they cast Marion Marsh, which, in retrospect, might have been a better idea, perhaps.
Yeah, so let me see if there are other question or comment. As we were talking more and more about the sources and the materials you use, of course, there is some very interesting photo. I don't know if there is one in particular that you will mention, although for me, definitely this one. I hope everybody can see it. Oh, there we go. Was particularly interesting. As a little, could it be like a little things, but actually it is a big part. I feel like explain somehow in what they were living, and as you were saying, as the first stardom system, what also meaning making a movie in that time means. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about Orson Welles and the Magnificent Amberson and Dolores, of course, in it.
Yeah, that I devote a whole chapter to that. She did talk quite a bit about that. She, as I mentioned, she found Orson Welles at times really annoying, specifically because he required the cast to sit there sometimes on a daily basis while he performed his magic tricks. And she found that really, just bothersome. But what she did was she went to Bullock's on Wilshire Boulevard, and she bought a bunch of well, actually, she got a big box, and she went to 5 and 10 cent stores and got cheap magic tricks and just stuff, and she put it in the box, along with a big stuffed animal, and had the box tied up in a big bow and had it delivered to him. So it was, that was kind of her way of saying enough with the magic tricks. But Wells said some interesting things about her, which ring true. He basically said that her heart wasn't really into being an actress at that point, but what he found so perfect about Dolores Costello, he had originally tried to cast Mary Pickford in it, but what he found wonderful about Dolores Costello is she had this. Not only was she, of course, breathtakingly beautiful, but she had this kind of maternal quality about her that he figured was very believable in this kind of Oedipal relationship with George, her son, who's obviously in love with her, and in her way, she's obviously in love with him. So I thought it was a brilliant casting decision on his part. But at that time, she was ambivalent. She thought she could be a part-time actress, while actresses like Joan Crawford and Bette Davis were clawing their way, to stay on top. And she eventually realized that, having a life outside of films, she would really sort of have to choose between them, and she chose the life. They had a wonderful ranch that she loved, and she ended up staying there for the rest of her life in Fallbrook, California.
There is a question, and there's also very interesting. The question is, the expert you included of Helen Costello's memories as truly heartbreaking, which I also felt is absolutely true. Nothing she wrote seems really adapted to the usual newspaper magazine story of the era. Her honesty goes beyond what one usually reads of the era. So do you think she knew it was unpublishable, at least at that time, and was more an exercise in self-analysis?
Well, she was very outspoken, very candid, and a little outrageous. And in fact, there are two of these short autobiographies. One was actually published in the Los Angeles Herald, and in the Sunday section. But that was the smaller one, and that wasn't as forthcoming and candid as the larger one, which is 44 pages. So yes, a little bit of. So she did write. No, she absolutely wrote it for publication, and she intended it to be honest and candid.
That's perfect. That's even more, make it even more interesting. There's a lot of experts that in the books that are pretty remarkable, and moreover very personal, which make it also great. We have other questions. Let's see. Could you tell us about Maurice's experience of Hollywood, given that his stardom was during his East Coast days?
Yes. Well, Hollywood was initially, well, not. I guess it's fair to say that Hollywood treated him terribly, and his initial experience in Hollywood was a disaster, not because of Hollywood so much. I mean, this is not just a story about what Hollywood does to actors. It's about what actors do to themselves. And the family dynamic was such that Maurice had been so dominant and at times abusive. But when he no longer had any money and was dependent on them, Dolores specifically, who was starting to hit it big, he was at their mercy, and they paid him back deliberately and at times brutally for the way he had treated them earlier when he was the dominant figure. So when he got to Hollywood, he was broke, and his career was a shambles, and he was totally dependent on them. And I think one of the parts of this book that's so interesting and so disturbing is I've quoted from his diaries, which really are just a miraculous series of artifacts. So many diaries that I've read over the years are just so dull, and they just sort of recall day-to-day occurrences. But this is, as my psychologist friend pointed out, these diaries were his only friend. He had no one else to talk to, no one else to confide in. So he really pours his heart and soul and his anger out in them. So yes, to try to answer the question, the initial Hollywood experience was awful. They meaning the family, kind of turned him into the family chauffeur, into the maid, into the gardener, and he had and when they would go to premieres, he had to stay home. So his initial experiences in Hollywood were awful because of his family, but then he couldn't find any work. But then gradually he began to get some bit parts, but those eventually faded out. And family members have told me there was sort of an unwritten, unspoken decision made by some of the studios to at least give him a little work, as the work turned out to be extra work. And he joined Central Casting, and he made a meager living until his retirement around the mid-40s as an extra, sadly and ironically.
I think ironically is exactly the point. Also, for other members of the family, that was the situation, to go to such a height and such a low and height, with again making even more the first family in films, because of maybe what we have today as a concept of film family, or families in films. And moreover, the sense the book gave is exactly the interaction, the interaction of the family, how not only dysfunctional, but how much of almost unbelievable and impossible things were actually happening in that kind of family. There is another question that maybe can lead us to something interesting, I would say, but you will tell me. The question is, Costello seems an Italian name. Was it?
That's a good question. I'm not a genealogist, and I didn't do a lot of genealogy, but apparently their origins are Spanish. This is what's come down through the family, and Helene had this dark, almost black hair, which Dolores and Jack Stoddard, Dee Dee, found absolutely beautiful, and with this china white skin, these gorgeous blue eyes. Who knows? I trace them as far back as their very Irish, as Maurice's very Irish parents. His father died when he was only 25 in an accident in a steel mill. So he never really knew his father. He was just an infant when his father died. I wish I had a better answer to the question about their origins. I don't think they were Italian, those, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. I also think, though, that that question can lead us to another point, which you explained many times, I think, in the books, is the fact how much of the fictional part was in real life. As one of the chapters is called an old Spanish habit, if I'm not mistaken, and there is an example of that, how they were able to either manipulate or reuse what can be fictional into reality and so on, even even out of the stage. So I don't know if you want to remind a little bit what is the chapter about.
Not sure if I understand the question, but that refers. Helene was quoting from films and plays that she knew and had seen or read when they were walking this same night that I write about. They had gone to Musso and Frank's to get lamb chops to take out back to Helene's tiny apartment. And as they were walking up Hollywood Boulevard, two friends of Helene's two men came walking up, and they were chatting on the street. And one of them said, "Helene, why do you always wear black?" And she said, "Because I'm in mourning for my life." And her daughter Deirdre was with her, and years later she realized that was a line from Chekhov's The Seagull. So yeah, Helene she had a wonderful sense of humor, and she really sort of had the right line for the right situation.
Oh, okay. There is just a last question, which I think is great. Get also to the point. For those of us who are unfamiliar with Maurice's work, can you recommend an available film that displays his star talent?
Yes, that is a great question. The Picture Idol from 1912. It's on YouTube. Amazingly, there's so much of his work that the Eye Institute has put up on YouTube. But the Picture Idol is wonderful. It's just decades ahead of its time. For one thing, because of Maurice's slow motion style of acting, it's not undercranked, it's not sped up, it's run at normal speed, and it really displays everything that Maurice accomplished at the Vitagraph studio. For one thing, it's about him. It's about it shows it's autobiographical. So you have an actor playing an actor, playing himself, and you really get to see him really at the height of his fame, at the height of his career. Excuse me. There's an eating scene in it that's just one of the funniest. One of the great eating scenes of film history, and that's just with a mouse click away. Just Google The Picture Idol on YouTube. Highly recommended. So
you were just mentioning also that luckily there are more also available thanks to the Eye Film Museum and others, which is great. And I hope again that this book will encourage to have a further view and retrospective on the entire family as is, which I think also would be very interesting and for sure will bring other things. If there is not, let me see, there might be one last question, maybe not. And we are just passing the 1 hour, so we are absolutely great. I really want to thank you, Terry, so much for being with us and first of all show again the book. We will send a little clip that make it even more visible. I'm sorry, my video today is not the best, but here it is. And in the video at the end, you will see even more clearly the titles. And so thank you so much for such a great book, moreover, such a great work on something that was so fascinating to be digging out. And we scratched the surface. So please, whoever is interested, buy the book. And it's a great long journey through the family itself. So I want to thank you, Larry. Yes, you want to say something else?
Well, just thank you so much for inviting me to your wonderful festival, Paolo, and next year in Pordenone, hopefully. live.
Exactly, live with more books and more films. Thank you again, Terry. Thank you, especially everybody and our tech department today, but also, of course, everybody in the festival. So we will meet again here for more books tomorrow at the same time. Thank you very much to everybody, and see you tomorrow.